I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And put it up in here. Okay, so this 403 writing a narrative essay. James and I were beginning to talk about that in the very beginning of this workshop, and I'm going to show you some ideas and different ways to begin to think about it. And I'll just do it over here in this wiki, and I'm going to reset the home. And I'll just create a new one. So this is SUNY Poly Steve hypertext essay. Looks like I already did this. Okay. I didn't. Okay, good. So what I'm thinking that we're doing is we're starting, and I'm just going to sort of talk a little bit and walk through this, and stop me if there's any, if it doesn't make any sense. Okay. So we've been thinking about different ways to think about hypertext. And we might want to begin to use the new here toolbar and make that a little bit more prominent by adding it into the visible, right? So that it's always visible in the view. So we might look at different practices we talked about. I'm going to go back now. We'll look at different techniques. And we're starting to build up an outline. So maybe it's a good time to take a look at our outline. And different ways to hypertext. Got different practices and different techniques. Not that good. This got tagged to the wrong level. I wasn't paying attention. Sorry about that. So this is different ways to think. So now we should start to see our outline begin to fill out. And we're going to talk about our practices. We'll talk about our techniques and examples that you've written. So we might think about your essay beginning to have these different parts. If we go back to the practices, the ones that we've been working with, linking, and this is behaving in a way that I wouldn't have predicted. Tagging. This should not. This should leave me here. I'm going to do this again. Linking, tagging, transcluding. So I think it keeps, okay, there's a default setting. Maybe I change frequently. I like it when it opens above the current tiddler. We'll see if that works better. Linking, tagging, transcluding, and we can continue to add to that. Listing, and I think it's templating that we need. And you could also drag those over if you wanted to from Design Right Studio. And the idea would be that you would begin to bring in examples that you've written and then tag your examples as one of these features. So you're going to think about what you've done and how you might highlight it. So over here is my exercise 2. And this is going to require a little bit of going back and reflecting on what you've done and finding what you've done. So I have to find all the tiddlers, okay? Looks like a lot of them are tagged 2.02. That's pretty good. Scampy's tagged dog. And so I've got a bunch of ones tagged dog. And maybe that's all of them. So I might begin to think about seeing if I can get all of them to have the same tag or to be just a couple of different filters. So maybe I've got list filter equals. So there's a bunch of them. And if I put a slash there, I'll just get them all in a row. Okay. And maybe I've got 2.02. That looks like maybe all of them. So I have to export them and then import them. So one way to do that, once I've got all of them, I can grab this filter, copy it, and put it in advanced search, and filter them, export them, show that export in the Finder, and drag them into my other wiki. I can do the same thing with 2.02. Export them, show them in the Finder. Okay, so now I've got all of my dog tiddlers, and this is responsive to what Orinthia was asking. Now I've got all of, that's a way of bringing all of my tiddlers together into one, and I might want to, this is, call this tiddler exercise 2.02 objects. And here it is, and drag that. So now I know which objects are now part of exercise 2.02. So if I wanted to say, for example, that, let's look at story 1, Dogs by My Feelings, and I wanted to say that this is an example of listing, I might write some comments here. This is an example of listing, one of the practices, one of the hypertextual practices. And I might even tag it listing. So when we ultimately get to listing, we'll know that there are some tiddlers that are tagged, that are tagging it. And we can begin to build up an understanding of these different techniques with examples. So we might want to say in listing, there are examples of listing. I think, was it listing? Yeah. There we go. So something along those lines as we begin to build, that's how we might begin to build out a hypertextual essay. So I hope that gives you some ideas of where we're heading. It doesn't have to be that complicated. I wanted to show you that we can begin to identify different ways to think about hypertext and build out some references to some examples that you've written. And we can begin to comment using this technique or other techniques that we develop. We can begin to comment. You can begin to write comments on your code or on the things that you've made that tie it back and associate it with the thinking that we've been doing. So that's where we're heading. And so let me stop there and we'll play again. Yeah, was that at all helpful?